Yeah, there you go.
Put it in 0.5.
I did.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. I just took a picture of the crowd for posterity.
Wait, let me get out.
No, you're right. It's too late.
Alright, Evan, we're good.
All right, it is 5 o'clock, and I will go ahead and call the special work session to order. Let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and start with our budget update. And
Andy's first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's work session is going to focus on the budget and what we know right now, and on the process that we'll be moving through as we go through the spring. Currently, we are finding the edges of all of our funds, and we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. We are also reviewing our expenditures within our grants, within the general fund, as we move forward. One of the points that I want to make tonight is that the district is going to have to make reductions due to declining enrollment and some funding pressures from the state government. However, I want to make this really clear tonight. The legislature is in session. What they do or don't do, we will still have cuts to make, right? So they are almost certainly not going to be able to rescue us from our enrollment. They may be able to avoid a further cut to education, but as it stands right now, our budget will have to right size. So go ahead.
well, so we're in the middle of a biennium, right?
Yep.
And they funded the traditional 49, 51%?
Yes.
Okay, so when you say no cuts, you mean the 51% of the total is expected to come in next year. But that doesn't mean that our revenue won't change because we're having enrollment down. And our costs will probably be more than a 2% increase.
That's right.
So so the no cut is just simply means we're still looking at that 51% number for next year.
We are. Jane can talk about that, but if you begin to decline in enrollment, sometimes what you got the first year can be adjusted even during that year. And of
okay.
course, you're not going to get
Yeah.
as much as, like, that is not a guarantee because our enrollment is tracked by the state now, and so you can have that decline.
Okay.
And that's, I think, the thrust of this is we're going to have to take some steps to make some reductions. And we want to make sure, regardless of whether there are people here tonight, this will still be available for them to look at.
Yeah, I think the communication is really important, that if you read the paper and say, oh, the legislature's not making cuts to education, like, well, then why is gaps? And I think people understand that,
Yeah.
what the difference there is.
Yeah. And so this being a work session, you guys, it's here for you guys. And so
Right.
questions as we go forward like that, I think are really important so that we have everybody here develop the same meaning. We don't expect the legislature to increase funding, and I'll talk more about that as we go through this. The March revenue forecast, which was released on February 4th this year, shows that there have been $285 million more in increased revenue. The current bill in the legislature to disconnect partially from the federal tax code, that has not become law yet. This is a debate. When the big beautiful bill was passed last July 4th, it took, there were several tax breaks that came with that, tax cuts. And Oregon, because we have an income tax, has generally coupled with the federal thing. I think that there are 10 states or so that rely heavily on income tax like Oregon. Most do a sales tax and a property tax, right? And so because of this, I think there's always been moves to align with that code. I think there's a lot of value somehow to do that. The state did disconnect in 2014 from the federal tax code, but over time had aligned with it again. And so this bill to disconnect would only partially cover the hole left by the federal tax. And if you'll recall, last year, when the legislature finalized the budget, they already had knowledge that that was going to happen, and it created an $800 million hole in the state budget just because we took the tax cut that the federal government had passed at that point. It is debated whether this is a good thing or not, because when you disconnect from the federal tax code, it raises taxes on Oregonians, right? Or no, it would raise them because it's already been cut. And so they have worked they didn't do it all. They are trying to do it selectively. Some things will be different than the federal code. And they project about 300 million is possible from that. I believe that's a 1-year number and not a 2-year, right? And so when all is said and done right now, COSA believes that the current deficit for the biennium is slightly less than 500 million total. What I don't know in the estimate is whether the budget for wildfire mitigation is adequate, because that has been stated a couple times and this year looks like it will be fairly dry. And so I don't know about that, and I don't know as well what the transportation plan and the recall of the gas tax, which is, they're fighting over when that will occur. I do not know what outcome will mean to that deficit. So those things are still very much in play as we go forward. So with a deficit of 500 million right now, not knowing whether those two are included in it, that changes our ability to get 4951 on what we thought we would get last year. Those things are all looming as possible negatives that the state would have to balance.
Do you know what percentage of the general fund is K-12 education?
27%.
What was it? That seems low
It does.
compared to 2 decades ago or whatever.
It has declined quite a bit.
Okay.
We
What
were-
percentage of that are we, do you know, of this gas?
I couldn't tell you. We generally, once we see out like $100 million,
Yeah.
we know that it's about $732,000 a year for us. So
I thought I heard once that we were around 1% of the K-12 population, but maybe we're less than that.
that's pretty dynamic, right? The challenge, so when I became a superintendent, the state education K-12 was about 38 to 40% of the general fund. And so there's been a decline. New competitors have come to the field, right? Homeless, just a lot of things. And one of the great challenges I think the state has is what will we do to fund the Oregon Health Plan?
Yeah.
Because that has been cut. That is the reason for the shutdown. And I don't want to quote, but I think like for every dollar we were investing in it in Oregon, it was being matched at 2, 3, or 4 to 1 by the federal government, right? And so those have been mitigated, and so that's a really difficult long-term, just absolute fundamental challenge for Oregon to continue that. And we obviously are seeing the share of the general fund, but there's been a lot of growth in revenue, right? So I think my first 2 years here, there were $27 billion in education, in the total state budget. And I think we are now adopting a budget of about 39 billion, I'm sorry. And that's a huge number, but our share of that has not grown, as you can see. So in the current biennium, in the short legislative session, because of this news, we think that cuts are less likely. The COSA lobbyists believe that most legislators are pretty supportive of the idea that the state education stability fund, which is a reserve fund, could be tapped for like 50 million or whatever to offset any need to cut. And so we think that in general, the legislature will not engage in a deeper cut to education in this biennium. But we have our own cut, right? And so we can't avoid that.
Yeah, just to drive that point home, even though our budget may not be cut, we're going to lose money because of the 360 students that we
Yes.
declined.
Yep.
Just getting it out there to make sure that people are aware that,
Yep.
like you said, we have our own cut that we can't get away from.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you. Is this my slide or yours, Jane? Mine? Okay. So the priorities that we are working on is we have to get through to a sustainable mindset here, that what we will do, we can continue to do. We want to protect the classroom as far as possible, but we also want to focus on literacy. I'll talk about that at the end of this work session. Oregon has not always done a great job of teaching the instruction of literacy to its teachers. We know that there are a lot of teachers and schools in this district that have done a lot of training together. We want to make sure that every student in this district can get that and has access and experiences someone who knows how to teach the skills of reading in front of that student, who can listen to them and figure out what is missing, and that we can do that everywhere in the district. We want to maintain student safety. We want to make sure that all of the things that this district does, we think of what the FACT team does on a daily basis to go out and support kids, to interact with other agencies, other nonprofits. We want to make sure that we are protective of those. And we also want to maintain student activities. One of the things I think that would come up would be, what about middle school sports? They just were added last year, last in, first out. But we know that that had a really positive, tangible effect on a bunch of kids. All of a sudden, our middle schools had student culture and were gathering for games. And it was just something that enhanced the feeling of together. Now, not every kid. I was amazed at how many middle school kids went to the games. Just went, just to be a part of it. And then we want to preserve a responsible reserve level. Jane and I watched my predecessor in Staten spend all the reserves to get through a year, and then he left because he knew what it meant to not have reserves. And so simply using them all, but we do have some challenges upcoming, and Jane will take you through that. But part of being sustainable is to have reserves of some level. And so we'll talk about that, what we're doing. Here's a graph, and it's probably hard to see over there, but you can see it up here. We have an enrollment decline in the state this year, measured in 2025. I think this is the October number, back to 2024. And you can see these are the 10 largest districts in the state with Albany added in as a comparator. Tigard-Tualatin, among those, lost 3.6%. Salem-Keizer lost 3%. Portland lost only 1.6%. And you can see Greater Albany lost approximately 4%. And this is something that we...
So that should be a negative?
Yeah, it's missing a -4.
Yeah, they're all negatives, I believe. Yeah. And so that defines the challenge.
By chance, do you happen to know roughly what Corvallis was? I know it's not technically one of our comparables, but it's proximately close.
Give me 1 minute.
Okay. Thank
Yeah, they're continuing to lose, and that's something that we will have the long-range committee look at. They're in a better situation budget-wise, having closed a couple schools.
Might be interesting to look at Lebanon too, just because they're on both sides of us, just to
Yeah.
see, as a percentage-wise, what their loss is compared
Yeah.
to ours.
And we will certainly come back and send that out to you guys when we
That's
know
fine.
that, if we
Yeah.
can't find it right now.
Just an interesting thing.
I always wonder, of the kids who are not coming to public schools, why?
Yeah.
Why have they made that choice? And have we learned anything about that?
So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. I think one of the, so that, there are multiple things all exacerbated by COVID,
Yeah.
right? One of the things is the workforce and where they have to work has changed significantly. We know that, for example, in Salem, the state of Oregon, they don't know whether they need all those huge buildings alongside the mall because so many other people now work from home, right? And so that's certainly one thing. The growth of charter schools online has accelerated over the last decade. You know, it used to be you could start a charter school, but it was a brick and mortar school. And then the kids kind of in that area could go to it. SIO then led the way with Oregon Connections Academy, which they had a district of, 900 kids and an online school of 3,500 kids, right? And so those things have happened, and more districts, particularly in Eastern Oregon, have started their own charter schools.
Yeah.
And there are, there's a ideological perspective, particularly around early elementary children, to protect them if they don't agree with everything that the state requires should be taught.
Yes.
And so those things were accelerated in COVID, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's clear that there are more alternatives, and I would be interested in, at some point, knowing, I need to talk to some people who've made other choices and find out.
We have a few that we have some insight. I'm always cautious to generalize from
Yeah, it's
conversations with only a few.
always dangerous.
There are, I think some of that is, like we know now, that churches have kind of homeschool groups where it isn't as burdensome for the parents because there's only a portion. There's a social aspect to it, those kind of things.
Yeah, the homeschool movement has been really blossoming.
Robust.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out for a year or two now if the kids don't exist or if they exist and are not going to our school.
Yes.
The answer is a little bit of both, is my understanding. And my other understanding is from Mr. Gardner is that it's hard to know exactly because the kids that aren't here are extremely hard to find.
Right.
Because there's no actual tracking system for kids that aren't enrolled in terms of how many there are, where they are. So we don't really know the numbers.
I'm pursuing one piece of information. In the process of working through this, I found that the state still requires, because it used to be that you had to register and you had to bring your child in to test. We do know that the state has said not everybody registers anymore, and there's really no enforcement. But the state still requires those students to take a test at their 3rd, 5th, 8th, and I think 10th grade years. And I posed that question this weekend to Jason Hay at LBL, and I said, what does that look like? How do you guys go out and do that? And he said he would look into it, and hopefully by Friday, I'll send it to you guys if I can find out. But I don't know that there is any active oversight, right? Or whether it's just, here's where we test, and if someone reaches out, they provide it, but they're not looking to make sure that everybody does it. So I'll have that information. I don't know anything about that yet, what they do. Could be that it's robust, but we'll see. But what's interesting is they can take the Stanford Achievement Test and a couple others, which are not the same as the SBAC, and it looks like what the state requires is more so that parents can know if their students are doing well or not. It's not about accountability. It's just for the parent to make a decision whether or not their children are actually progressing in school. So, but once I hear more about that, I'll share that with you. So this again is another picture of enrollment over time, and you can see that there has been a decline. The big one was in COVID when we went from 93-36. That's ADMR. You guys will remember that ADMR is the total students, but it's weighted by their part of the day they attend. Students can be half-time or part-time, like at a high school, and not be a full-time student. So bodies is not the equivalent. I believe that 93-36 actually coincided with the district being at 9,550 students. So it's a slightly smaller number. We'll go to the next slide. At some point here, I'm going to turn it over to Jane and get to the nitty-gritty. That's a slide that looks like Jane's.
And even on the last one, what's so important to me about that last slide is the slope. And so when I look at projecting 26, 27, is it down another 200? Because 23, 24 to 24, 25, we're down 200. 24-25 to 25-26, we're down 215. So what is 26-27? So that's what I wonder when I look at that slide. And we're paid on the prior year, so I'm able to project our funding based on what ODE, what we have submitted for this year. So on this slide, you've seen this before. This is what I use to project our enrollment. And the beginning fund balance, 24-25 to 25-26 went down 2 million. 26-27, Friday we had some good news from ODE about they had recalculated, and so we got a couple $100,000. So I'm believing 26-27 will be 13.1 million. It was 12.8. And then the next line is the basic school support. So we are projected to receive less in 26-27 than in 25-26, and it's purely based on the declining enrollment. So that means we start the year with 3.5 less million projected resources than we have during this 25-26 year. And
How
then
different is you're projecting 13.1, what did we budget at? What does the budget say we were gonna have?
less than that.
Okay, that's what I thought, but you don't know how much, okay.
Yeah.
It's okay, 200 grand?
We, HR department staff was amazing and worked to redo our teacher experience. I knew it was not correct. And so they reran 24-25, updated the teacher experience, went from negative 2.4 to negative 0.62. So that had a huge impact on us and gave us additional revenue.
Gotcha, okay.
So that's pretty awesome.
Good job, HR.
And then this graph just shows you ODE updated our 25-26 ADM based on what they believe. They take second period, they look at prior years, calculated how much it goes down based on attendance. And so they believe 25-26 will be 8,273. Right now, second period was 8,383, so they subtract basically 100. And then our ESL is going down. And because the ADMR went down, of course, the 11% cap goes down. And something I didn't expect, the student in poverty went from 305 to 216. So the total weighted decrease is 476. And that could impact our enrollment-based grants like SIA, High School Success, IDEA, Title, and McKinney-Vento.
Is the student in poverty calculation driven by us or by the census?
No, it's SAPE. I don't know what, SAIPE. It's no longer based on free and reduced applications. It's a survey the state does, and it's the free and the food stamps. So I was surprised that dropped because last year it increased for us. So I called today and ODE said that they believe their numbers are right. So this is what I know so far, my projections to increase costs, the salaries, the COLAs, the steps. And this is if every person employed now rolled forward, right? This is the picture in time. Everyone rolled forward, steps, COLAs, be a 4.6 million increase. PERS cost 1.7 million. So all those costs together, plus the reduced resources, tell me that we are looking at about a $10 million deficit. And that's real rough. You know, things will change. Just like Friday, the state changed the information for us. So the legislature is not done, and there's much work to be done on the budget. So that is based on where we are right now. And last time I talked to you, it was 8 million, but that was before ODE updated the ADM and before, lots of other changes. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our fund balances because when Andy and I came, for example, we didn't have a technology reserve. We didn't have a capital projects fund for facilities. And so this entire time we've worked to build those reserves. And so I just want to go through those different funds, why we have them, what their purpose is. And they are going to help us. As like for 25, 26, our total fund balances will go down about 5 million. So we're using them to support us. And the projection I look at when I look at 26, 27 budget is that we will end at like 11 million, which would be the 8%. So that would continue to go down. And then we have to just stay there.
Yep. Can we go back, Jane, if we're
Yeah.
not in a hurry? So that's one of my concerns is we're decreasing our ending fund balance at a fairly significant rate, and how to achieve that soft landing so that you aren't reliant upon that to achieve budgeting goals.
That is a challenge. And you remember when Glenn Kearns, our auditor, talked with us, he is concerned that we are deficit spending. And this is our second year of deficit spending. 26, 27 will be the third year of that.
Well, and I personally am not, an 8% reserve is better than nothing, but it's not the 12% reserve that's recommended. And so I'm not really excited. I mean, I understand we're in these times and everyone's gonna have to make some adjustments. But long-term stability, we have to be very careful not to go below that 8%. I'm certainly gonna dig my heels in if we get to that point. Because the 8%, is it even 1 month's salary for the district?
It's right at 1 month's salary, and the auditor recommended 3 months.
Right, so and when you started, we had some speed bumps where we did not get money from the state. And had we not had this cushion, payroll checks wouldn't have gone out.
Right. It does make me nervous because at some point then to meet the payroll while you're waiting for property taxes, you could have to borrow funds. And we have a revenue source from our interest, that will go down. So when you're in that declining environment, it affects a lot of things.
So we get back to Andy's early on comment that we need to right-size the district. We're going to have to be able to work within the guardrails placed upon us. And that's the challenge, right? That's what we're all here chatting about, but, yeah, thanks.
So in our special revenue fund, there are different sub-funds where we have reserves that make up our total beginning fund balances. And what I'm talking to you about is mostly the beginning fund balances because that's the number that shows in the audit. That's the number that people look at. And there's miscellaneous grant funds that together total about $247,000. Those will be expended. And we have Medicaid funds, which Ryan knows about, of $1.5 million. And we're using those to help support our FACT program. And we will spend that down by about $250,000 this year. Marv is working really hard to increase our Medicaid. We bill 3 times a year. Her last billing was the highest the district's ever received. It was almost $500,000. And so that is super exciting. And we're going to train all our administrators on billing the Medicaid at one of our next alt meetings. So we're hoping to.
Are you using any general funds to support FACT, or are they 100% Medicaid?
No, they're supported by general fund also.
I'm surprised you're doing that when you still have 1.5 million there.
So,
That's an
it's
option.
going down about 300,000 this year, and it will go down again next year.
So when I was here, and again, everybody does things differently. FACT ran me about a little over $300,000 a year, and I built the reserves up to cover me. I got cut my first year here, and I was scrambling, and I didn't want it to happen again. But I was 100% self-contained Medicaid. I had to pay it. I had to be self-contained, and so I built the reserve on purpose to support it. So, but I left it right about there. So it's grown, I guess, or something. or you're subsidizing. At any rate, I think that's something you could look at, because we ran that way from fax creation up till my retirement. It ran entirely self-contained on Medicaid MAC funds.
And if we can increase the resources coming in so that I know we have a revenue source to support the program, that's something that we will look at to help us.
Okay.
You know, the numbers I've given you are just, we haven't found the solutions yet. They're just the expenses and the resources. And then, you know, as we work, one thing we're going to do is meet with our principals, meet with all our department leads, and work through each of the funds, work through each of our priorities going forward.
And we will also communicate what we're sharing with you tonight out to our bargaining unit members.
Okay.
So that they have an understanding. I think in the last bargaining, there was a lot of education needed about like the general fund alone, let alone the other ones.
Right.
Because they think, hey, we have all this money. But there's a lot of different things that these are set aside for.
Yeah, and I think it's important that everybody understand that ending fund balances may show up as a revenue, but they're not a revenue. They're a floor. They're what's already there.
Yeah.
Once you spend it one time, it's gone. You don't get to do it again. And I think it feels like sometimes people forget that. That we're not dropping 8 million a year into a fund somewhere. We're keeping the same 8 million there, and it just moves forward every year.
Yeah.
And the Student Activity Fund has 1.2 million. They expend and they raise, and the 4 years I've been here, it has stayed about that, which is interesting. Bus Replacement Fund, at one of our last meetings, you approved bus purchases. That will be utilized towards those bus purchases. And SB 1149, remember that comes through the power bills, comes in as revenue to us. One of our previous board meetings, you authorized the transfer of that out of SB 1149 into our capital projects fund. And that was part of the plan when we built the budget. So instead of a transfer out of the general fund this year to support capital projects, we're using SB 1149. And that will be the same again next year. So that transfer saved general fund dollars, $500,000.
Just another point about the Student Activity Fund, when that's broken down, it's like a bunch of people have money in a savings account with us. So the football coach at both schools, they have a football account, those kind of things. That's theirs that they have raised. It is.
We're just
we
a
can't just
trustee,
like-
we're just a trustee of
You're the
money.
trustee.
Yeah.
That's a great way of saying it.
And the school lunch fund, next board meeting, I will be bringing a financial for that. That 1.5 million was generated during COVID when they changed the rules, all kids ate free. And when I look back, prior to COVID, the general fund had been supporting the school, the nutrition program. And this year, we'll use about 250,000 of that to support the transition to genuine programs. And so many districts are supporting their food service through general fund, and we have a ways to go. This will help smooth that as we move forward. And it's definitely dedicated to school lunch fund. You cannot use that for anything else. And then there are sub-funds in our capital projects fund. And the facilities capital project was generated in the 4 years I've been here by transferring out of the general fund, and now this year transferring out of the SB 1149. And we'll expend approximately 500,000 out of that fund this year. And there is a long list of facility needs, much greater than that $1 million. I think it's about 14 million, isn't that right, Andy?
Yes.
The list of needs.
Yes, approximately.
Transportation building, 2 million. That is from the sale of the bus barn. And it's just held there to either support our facilities, support our bond. If we have an HVAC system go out, we have that money because it's in capital project that would go towards that emergency. And then bond fund is 4.7 million, beginning fund balance on July 1. We have already expended approximately 1.5 million this year. And excise tax fund is 3 million. And remember, that is restricted by the Senate bill for new construction or the purchase of property. So if we do go for a bond, that could be used to support the bond program. And technology capital projects, the fund that we started after I came, we did not have a technology plan. To purchase the student Chromebooks, the teachers' Chromebooks, we didn't have a plan. And so there's $1 million in that. This year we'll transfer $200,000 from the general fund towards that, and we'll spend approximately $500,000. And this is just a chart, those same funds that I just described to you. The blue shows the beginning fund balance. The gray shows the projected ending at the end of this fiscal year.
Jane, going back one step, we talk about the fund balances. Do we have a curriculum budget at all?
No. We do have in SIA, we have ongoing curriculum costs built into the SIA fund, like $1 million.
But we're not budgeting so much money a year for our known curriculum costs?
We haven't established like a capital projects curriculum reserve fund. We have not done that.
Do other districts do that?
We had one at North Santiam.
Yeah, it seems like you'd want to, especially for the big purchases.
So you try to take some of the sting out of it, because that's one of the problems we've been fighting on curriculum, is trying to come up with the money, because we don't put aside, pick a number, $250,000, $300,000 a year, that over time will build up enough so that when it comes to make that purchase, it's like, oh, well, we have the money, now we just have to find the right program. So I'd like to encourage us to look at that for budget.
Certainly, don't disagree with what you're saying. I think the math total curriculum, had we done it at all grades, would have been something on the order of 2 million. And so I think the great challenge will be, do we begin to build an account that we can do that with? We don't know of a lot of districts that are lining up this year. You'll recall that we went through language arts, math, and science in 3 consecutive years. That had happened because of COVID. They had changed when language arts would be there. Those are the big 3. And so most districts are somewhat partial in what they were able to get done through the COVID times.
Oh, and I understand that. All I'm talking about is to have a long-range plan where we start to save for it. And yeah, we're not going to get there over a year. It's going to take 5 years to get a significant amount of money in there where you can roll forward. In the meantime, we'll have to bite the bullet. But I'm just trying to find a way to get to the long range.
Side of that either, right,
Okay.
for sure.
Well, it's a pretty important function
Yes.
to have it be not something we can do.
Yeah. So we just did last year
Right.
the math,
Yeah.
right? And so, and that was split between 2 years, half in one year, just as it ended, and the next year we finished the other half. That's, as I understand it, that's what we
Yes.
did. And so we'll continue to move forward to the next one, which I believe is science. And we'll have to do that. The challenge, though, is like getting down to where, like, we want to make sure that the kids have school this year, with an adequate number of adults.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't suggesting immediacy, but just a long-range plan that we fold into the budget that just becomes part of our cost of doing business.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, and long-range goals that need to be held out there, whether we can fund them now or not.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it's important, I think, to have an idea, have a concept of what the ideal would be, so that you don't lose that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point, Chris. And we don't want to lose that.
So this shows you like the SB 1149. The blue is the beginning balance, and then it ends at 250,000 because it transfers out. And then this is the capital projects. The change, you can see that bond fund decreases, excise tax, the gray increases. We'll receive about 500,000 resources this year. So just a different way to see those fund balances. And then another fund balance that we have and Russ Allen, my predecessor, had started this. There's 2.5 million in the PERS debt service fund, and it's gradually increased since I've been here. And that's very intentional because our PERS bond ends in the 27-28 biennium. You can see in 27-28 we make the final bond payment, the 2.986 is that final debt service payment. But the rate goes up 6% because our rate credit goes away. The rate credit expires sooner than the debt service because the rate of payroll has increased greater than their 20-year projection, right? And so as we go through the budget process, my recommendation will be we use $500,000 to help us in 26-27. We save the 2 million and use it all in 27-28 to help offset that large increase.
That's very common to many districts in the state. Took out a per site account bond. Essentially, we have a bond. It earns interest. In the market, we pay the bond rate against it. If what we owe and pay is less than what the market returns, then that's an offset that PERS calculates directly. We have benefited $16.5 million
Yeah.
over the last, what year did he start that? 2003?
It'd be 20 years. Yeah,
2007?
I think so, 2007.
Many districts engaged in that. We're all seeing it end at the same time, right? And so what has happened is payrolls have increased over the last few years, which has spent down our potential earnings to the point Baker School District is already done with their site account. They are now paying the interest and getting no more from the site account even now because of the increase in payroll. It was assumed to be at like 3 or 4% increase. Many districts have seen, and we did as well, when the inflation hit, it forced salaries up. And so it's spending out that sooner than we would like. We are not nearly in as bad a shape as some other districts, Baker being the one who just found out here just a couple months ago, yeah, you're done. So they're having to just shoulder that.
So this just sort of a summary as we look at all that and we work with our budget committee and our principals. We want to right size, but long term, like Brad talked about, our fund balances, it's very important that we use them wisely as we align our expenditures with our declining enrollment and our declining resources. We'll work with our administrators to, and you as the board, to set our goals and priorities. 10 million is a large decrease, and the more information, the more we work together with all of our administrators, we'll make good decisions. And we're going to always keep a focus of long-term stability. And Andy wanted to talk about quality is the focus.
Is that on the next slide? Yeah, and so we're gonna be messaging this to our, all of our employees, and it really will guide our planning. But to your question earlier, Chris, in general, during the last 4 decades, we have generally considered ourselves as a monopoly. We were the provider, and there weren't many options outside of that. Private schools existed in many communities, but did not account for a significant proportion of students. Homeschool students were and still are required to register with ESDs. The majority of homeschool students must take tests at the 3rd, 5th, 8th, and 11th grade. And they use 3 different tests other than SBAC. And we had attendance laws. So a kid that just simply wasn't going to school, we had attendance laws that forced them, and up to the point where you could actually assess a fine after certain notifications. And so there really weren't a lot of options, and they were essentially served by us in kind of a monopoly of the market. Let's go to the next slide. So over time, and we talked about this, brick and mortar charters were then added to online charters, and those are available to students everywhere. If you have internet access, you can, in Albany, take your choice of schools. There is a 3% limit, which we have now exercised, which says you have to be in our district, but this can be appealed to the state. Many of the online charter schools in Eastern Oregon have corporate partners that actually have, and you know, Connections Academy works through an Orca as well. Those are corporate partners who actually generate something for shareholders out of that. And so frequently they do not have the best outcomes, but they have worked really hard to improve that. And they have a pretty high student-to-teacher ratio, but people can attend those out of their own home. And so, and again, the change in work environments for parents have allowed people to engage in combinations of homeschool, partnering with other parents to put together what do they call those? I think they call them co-ops now, that will meet and either be at a church or in different people's homes. And so all of those things, I think, indicate that in this time period, we do not have a monopoly that people must go to. They have a lot of choices. And so we have to think of ourselves now as being in a market, right? That people don't have to come to our school, that it's up to us to really go to work and define ourselves as a quality product. Let's go to the next slide. So we have to make every effort to improve our quality, which is really measured. I think if there were a couple of places where we know that there are gold standards, one is our 4-year grad rate. It went up again this year. All high schools in Oregon did increase that number this year. And third grade reading is the gold standard as well. And so we need to go to work on that. And so this year, even as we're making these cuts, we're gonna look at how we can truly develop all of our staff as teachers of reading that are associated with that. And that is a priority. We're working on it with our collaborative steering committee, working hard to put together a year of learning for them. Principals, our special education teachers, our EAs, our regular teachers. Just really working to make sure that we have a really coherent approach and that we can make a difference in that. And we are at the end.
So,
Oh, hi, Brady. Go ahead.
you're the chairman, you can go.
No, I'm calling you, you go first.
All right. So go back one slide if you would. And one of the things that I would like to see is that we do a lot of communicating about how we're improving the quality for our students. We need to be mindful of that and to hit every button possible. Hans, I'm talking to you. Sorry. Just so that people know what we're doing,
Yeah.
where we're working towards, how we're improving our district, how we're improving our children's education. Because to do the work is one thing, but we also need to let the people know we're doing the work and we're achieving the results. And we need to be talking about that over and over and over again to get the message out.
So there are a couple things that I do want to share. Bruce has done a great job. He and Sue Luthra have pulled now our iReady results, and we will now be able to share, when we share with you guys, there is a state average. We now will be able to look at our iReady results, which you guys see in the red, yellow, green.
Right.
We can now see those against the average of students in the state that take iReady.
Will we be able to compare against other schools or just the state average?
I think it's the state average that's on there for now.
It's just the
I
state
mean,
average
obviously an
for already.
average aggregate, but I'm just curious if we
But-
can compare districts.
So we'll be, 3 times a year, we'll bring you that. Of course, the principals will continue to share their scores. But we also will communicate heavily around what we are doing to train the staff as well, right? Andrea Castaneda, who's the superintendent in Salem, had actually taken 2 days off of school for K-5s so that her teachers could get a ton of training all at once. We're not above that. She said that when she did that, you would expect that there were people, hey, how come we're missing school? But there's a general appreciation. We appreciate that you're really digging in and making a sacrifice here for that to happen. So that we're working through this with the collaborative steering committee, which is teachers and administrators. We're open to those approaches if we can make a difference in what people learn and what they are then able to do.
And I appreciate that. I've been pretty steadfast on trying to keep children in classrooms throughout the entire time as much as possible. But that is like the one area where I would side with you that, yes, spending a couple of days to get the teachers better able to teach reading so that we're all teaching the same methodology, so that a student that goes from kindergarten through 5th grade has the same basic learning model as they progress would be huge.
Yeah.
And so I would fully support that.
Well, and we're not sold on that yet. We're also looking at the option of like 2 days just prior to in-service week start. Like, there's still many different ways to do that, but we want to make sure that it's, if I had one complaint about the Salem Kaiser model, it was 3 days drinking from a fire hose, then go do it. We'd rather have a learning year with the opportunity to practice, then come back, like that we move forward systemically. And so we're working on that right now with the collaborative committee.
I remember when we had Goals 2000, which is a long time ago, but that was a great deal of teacher education with your colleagues. That's the best way to do, because then you could say, I'm doing this, what are you doing, how is that working? And I think we achieved more gains then than I had seen before, for a couple of reasons. One was that we all had more information to work with, and we could work together, but also the target was clear, absolutely clear to everybody, and it held still for a long time. So
That's good.
I am really thinking it's a good idea to have lots of teacher education, as much as we can manage, and to have it at intervals, not all at once. Like the fire hose, yes, that's a garden hose. Several garden hoses would be better.
Yeah.
And it would be important to introduce long-term sustainability, ideally using the PLC model, right?
Yes.
So give them the instruction, and then inspect it through the cell, and then review it through the PLCs, and then cycle it like that. If you set it up right, it should go indefinitely, right? Instead of just fire hose, and then a year later, like, hey, remember we taught you last, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'd like to see a full-on plan for sustainability
Yeah.
and something like that.
I think both the cell and literacy, when we build this, it's not a one and done, not 1 year and then that, gradually erodes as people leave the district.
Right.
We have to figure out what is the baseline that everybody must get to move in so that they are capable then of working in a PLC and being further up to speed.
Yeah.
The PLC
Make it part of the
model,
culture.
the PLC model's a great model, but it doesn't always, it doesn't always work on its own. It requires considerable amount of, I think, supervision and encouragement, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But I remember when we got PLCs, and we're going, what are we gonna do with this? And it took a while.
One of the things that we experienced with the cell, even in the difficult year, last year was, we were teaching that once a month, and then principals were going out and looking for it. It was amazing how willing the staff of the district was to implement. They saw something that was helpful to them and that in many ways challenged them. And it was an amazing year of growth in practice. And so when it comes to that, I have a really high regard for the people of the district and their willingness to learn and change and grow. And so,
I think you can assume that everybody wants to do better.
yeah,
It's,
we saw it.
It's just the way, you'd rather do well than not.
Yeah, that's
But I
right.
think there's some trust to build back on those PLCs, right? I think before you came, there was a little bit of a top-down component to the PLCs that wasn't there previously that
Yeah.
I think burned some bridges we need to rebuild. Because I agree with you, there needs to be some supervision and guidance, but it doesn't look like the district office says, do this, so do it, and we're gonna grade your worksheet at the end. It's, this is where we're all trying to go. Why don't you guys look at the data?
Yeah.
Make decisions based on what we've taught you on how to get there. So,
Yeah, and so Ryan is exactly correct. I think what you had said about it's very difficult sometimes to like gauge how that time continues to be productive. But I think that we went through a period of time where there was like, of course it's going to be productive because at the end of it, you have to have all of this done and turned in. And so that played out. And so I think, a new approach. But my own thinking has been, like, if we are looking for it in the classrooms, we should see the product of that. So you can give people autonomy, but you can look, because whatever they're doing should show in a classroom, right? And so just monitoring that, I think, is a really important aspect of it. And then we aren't fighting as much about, hey, I need to control your time. I can see whether your time is valuable, right? And so lots to do there. I do like fundamentally the idea that we're going to be downsizing, but that we have something that we're going to pin ourselves to, that we are going to do this even as we do that, because that's a positive outcome for the district and kids.
yeah, it
as
is
well.
important to have priorities. So speaking of right sizing, a word you keep using, is there like a base model of, like, I'm trying to think of, if a typical elementary school in this district has two by six, right? Two grades at two classes at every grade. You start with 12 teachers, one principal, one office manager, one custodian, one special ed teacher, 2 aides. Like, is there a base model and then you build up, or do we have how do we, when you say right size, what's the starting point? And what, for a minimum expectation to run a building, do we have that, or does it work that way, or?
Well, I think we've fallen below. Susie can talk to you about all the places where if we had two, we would have very small class sizes.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
and so some of that, we've passed that point.
But I just mean like as a generic,
Yeah.
something to work off of. a
Well,
base.
I think one of the things that we'll work with is the class size in the contract gives us a pretty good number, right? It's a number that I would want teachers to face as they teach. But like today, we spent the morning reviewing all expenditures in the SIA grant, and we're trying to find the edges of all of these things. What does that look like? How can we find efficiencies there? Some of the entries in there have existed for 3 or 4 years, and so there may be better ways to do those. But there is also we cannot get away from the fact that if we lose 360 kids, and a school of 360 kids is no longer here,
Yeah,
who works there, right?
right, but I feel like you have to have
There's a certain number of people.
yeah, you sort of have to have a fallback point, right, that says, because if you say, well, at Tequila it looks like this, and South Shore this, and Calpia this, I don't think that's a manageable workload, right? Like,
No, it's not.
You gotta say, look, the minimum or the base model looks like this, and then, we build out or back from there, I guess. I don't know, I guess it used to be a ratio, my understanding is you don't use a ratio anymore, so I wondered if something had replaced that.
We did use a ratio at the secondary levels.
Oh, you
Yeah.
do still use
Yeah.
that? Okay.
And so, and you can see then. And then the other thing we're going to do is, and this will go to the long range committee first, you guys can see the information as we begin to do it. We are going to share out the costs of each building divided by the students, right?
Gotcha.
So we can see which buildings are more expensive, which buildings are less. And there are some special, circumstances that one building may have that others don't have.
Right, that's
Those kind of
true.
things.
The nice thing about the ratio system is you can tell me exactly what a 0.1 on the ratio costs, right? Say we're gonna
Yeah.
have to drop the ratio by 0.1, that costs X dollars, or we
Yeah.
have to add 0.1, it'll cost, so that helps a little bit with the math and the communication.
Yeah, and so we do use ratios, but then, in August, I think Susie made several blends in August because all of a sudden we saw through registration that the number of kids we'd ratioed on were not there,
Yeah,
right? And so that was a very hectic August for her. She did a great job. But at some point, we need to think about, how we create schools that are slightly larger, because many, if there's a building with 400 kids and there's a building with 200 kids, the secretary is twice as expensive, right? And so we have to just look at those things as well. But those recommendations would probably not, we'll run ratios for this year's budget. We'll be interacting with principals on a couple of different occasions around what their thoughts are, and then we'll move forward. The other stuff will come to you from the long-range committee.
Yeah, it just seemed like under the system, principals are in their buildings and they know what they need. So when you have a more generic ratio concept, and then they choose what to add with whatever's left over after they've staffed their classrooms, versus the district saying, okay, we're gonna put a half a literacy coach and a half a behavior specialist and 3 SEAs in every building. One building says, I don't need that many SEAs, and the other building says, I actually need more literacy time than that, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a straight up ratio, then principals, and I know the secondary already does it this way, right? They staff their building, then they fill in the blanks, and the menu of, they convert classified staff or secretarial staff based on what their building needs.
Yeah.
But the money stays the same, and they have the freedom as a leader to make the decisions within that. It just seemed like that's an easier way to communicate about it, especially when you're looking at efficiencies and right sizing it, restricting it.
Yeah, I think the other challenge to that is that not every principal will prioritize the same thing, and then all of a sudden you've got an apple, an orange, a
Yeah,
banana.
well, that's a problem too, you're right.
Yeah.
It's
so-
hard and, across so many
Yeah.
different schools.
So that's where your basic model
Right.
would help.
Yeah,
And, as I look at schools, it's, there are some literacy specialists, and there's some other kinds of specialists, and I think, well, this school doesn't have that, and why? And there's probably a reason, but it's still a question that might be asked. What
sure.
exactly do we need?
so there's lots of work, different levels of feedback. We'll be working with the administrators to get general prioritizations. There's always a little NIMBY in that, right? But we'll work through that and move through to it. But, and by that I mean not in my backyard.
Right, yeah,
Right?
okay.
And so, and we'll engage in multiple iterations, and I believe at some point we'll be also just sitting down and meeting with those different levels groups.
Yeah. It'd be nice for me to understand more about what the community values, right, in terms of, local control from a building perspective, or consistent across buildings,
Yeah.
or, specialist time, and reading versus PE versus, or not reading, but music versus PE, or whatever, right? Like, it'd just be good, but I don't have a good sense of that.
Yeah. Well, lots of
They
work
may
coming
not
up,
either.
for sure.
And they may not either,
And
you're right.
I think that people make decisions based on assumptions, much more than they make decisions based on facts. And so to get actual information out is key.
All right. Now we're at the public comment
Should
portion
we
of
take
our
public
meeting.
comments?
I'm sure
Anybody?
Hans has a couple.
Hans, go ahead, go. You're up.
We'll just take it, you know what, whatever anybody wants to ask us, we're here. Okay.
What? We got nothing but time now. Put it on the record. Come on, you put us on the record. Let's go. Come on, hit it. Go ahead, get up the podium. How's it feel, dude?
Great.
If you want to, sure. Yeah, we've got
You
nothing
can
but
if you
time.
want, but you don't have to.
Yeah,
It'd just be easier for us to hear you is all.
you're just an easy victim here.
That you people can watch it.
Yeah, please.
Sure, why not?
Well, I understand it's probably gonna come up again at the school board meeting when it starts at 7. Is that right? You're gonna have another financial update?
We're
If-
only gonna review this,
Just-
send people to this.
But this will be your easiest point to ask questions because you've got like a
Okay.
half an hour, so.
All right. Well, I just want to clarify the main difference between the last projection in December and this projection, the main change that's happened now in terms of your result, or updating the projected deficit, is that just mainly enrollment?
Yes.
Okay, those are no other, other factors I should note to make sure I'm getting all that right.
So there's always lots of changes both directions, but the main change was the enrollment. On Friday, ODE updated our basic school support for this school year. And we received those changes where they reduced the poverty, and all of those had an implication, of course, on next year because we'll be paid on 25, 26. So it was that update that
Build the deal there. Okay.
yes.
All right. There you go.
Okay. That was it?
I'm puzzling over
Thanks.
defining poverty according to a program where eligibility is set. I mean, if you're going to define people's poverty by whether or not they qualify for SNAP, if you were to change the qualifications, the number of people in poverty might disappear entirely, right? And that seems like a kind of a,
Would you be interested if we shared with you, like, the definitions and what that looks like now? Because it used to be that when
Yes.
students parents filled out free and reduced requests,
I remember that, yeah.
then that became the percentage that was calculated on. And we've since gone to a more formulaic, but it'd be great to share, and you guys could kind of understand what that looks like.
I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
What was the number again? 250?
216.
Yeah, so we're in a district with how many Title I schools, and yet we only have 216 kids that are listed as in poverty? I mean,
This is hard for me to believe.
that's,
It's hard to wrap your head
Right.
around. And I'm wondering also if they're basing it off of SNAP, is that people who would qualify or actual people who actually applied and received? Because there's a disconnect there.
We'll do some of this research, and we'll bring it back to you. I
Yeah.
think that would be a great enlightening thing.
Yeah,
And we can also be engaged with ODE as we do it
yeah.
around, are you kidding?
That'd be a great way to start.
All of a sudden, we're just
you
so much
kidding?
more prosperous, right?
Probably won't help the conversation.
also interesting,
No,
your
probably
sped
not.
numbers are way up, but your enrollment's down, which means your 11% number's down. So you're going both opposite
Yeah.
directions on that one too.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to sit about 12, 12 and a half. You look like you're closer to 16.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
Private schools don't have to take.
Yeah, right.
Is that it? Are we gonna?
Are we good? Should we adjourn? Oh,
A lot of input tonight.
If I guess. I know you'll probably bring this up when you do the long-range facility update as well, but I think my recollection from maybe briefly watching some clips from the last meeting was the, the discussion about, how you would, pull the idea of maybe potentially closing a school. And I'm curious maybe if there's like an update on sort of at what point is that conversation going to be really considered? Maybe we reach this certain enrollment number, or you're going to reach
Yeah.
some other budget figure.
Yeah, great question. The committee will, I think, be the best group to send a recommendation to the board. That work will probably go to this board as early as June and as late as September. And so we don't anticipate that work to happen suddenly this year. I think that there are several considerations that committee needs to make. For example, if we have a bond and we're closing schools, we cannot commit the error of putting money into schools that are possible closures. And so we'll ask that committee to work out some recommendations there. And as I just said, we will begin the conversation really in April around that, around the cost of each building right now per student, right? Because there's a wide variety of our costs per student in this district. Right, so, not yet, but the work will be done. And you're absolutely welcome to attend those.
I totally understood. Other meetings sometimes conflict, but
Sure. Thank you for the question.
okay, if we have no more comments, questions, or anything, then I guess I would take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn tonight's work session.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Bang.
Oh, so